Well, teachers in part of England are going ahead with planned strikes next week, despite an offer from the government to hold talks about pay. The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, said that she would start formal pay talks with the National Education Union as long as it called off its industrial action. Well, let's speak to the Joint Secretary-General of the National Education Union, Kevin Courtney. Hello, Mr Courtney. Thank you for joining us. So the RCN are having intensive talks today. They've agreed to call off their planned strikes. Why not your union?
Well, because we haven't seen anything so far in the government's letter to us that indicates a seriousness of intent. We first wrote to them raising questions about teacher pay, support staff pay, funding of those in July of last year. They didn't start to meet with us until we were on the verge of winning our ballot. We've had one day of strike action on the 1st of February. They sent us a letter yesterday on the 21st of February. And really, there are 3 wasted weeks, because the same day they sent us the letter inviting us to talks, they also gave their evidence to the school teacher review body. And in that evidence, they say that the teacher pay rise for next September should be 3%. Now, inflation's coming down, but all the forecasts that we're seeing for Q3 for this year are RPI above 10%, CPI above 6%. So a 3% pay rise would be another very big pay cut on top of pay cuts going back to 2010. The government really needs to invest in our children and invest in the people who work in our children's schools.
I imagine you will be watching very closely what happens with the talks between the government and the RCN. If, as we were discussing, I don't know whether you heard it a few moments ago with Nick Eardley, our political correspondent, that the talks are maybe looking at backloading, if you like, the coming year's pay settlement, so that there is money to pay for this fiscal year to bring people up. There'd be a bit of a wait, admittedly, but how appealing might that be if it was at the right level?
Well, that is what we want to talk about. We want to talk about pay for this year and closing the gap. That might mean looking at next year's pay as well to close the gap. So that is what we want to look at. The letter that we were sent yesterday from Gillian Keegan doesn't say she's prepared to talk about pay for this year, doesn't say there's money available from the Chancellor for that, because one of the things that we've kept saying to government is that any pay rise for staff who work in schools needs to be fully funded. If it isn't fully funded, you just end up with cuts in schools, and we can't have that. So we need that commitment that there's funding and there's a willingness to look at this year's pay. Then there's the question of how much they're prepared to move. But we would go into talks, if there's that sense that we can move on these things.
What would you say to families, though, who are facing disruption to working patterns because their children aren't going to be in school? Obviously, that might mean that parents are losing out on pay. It's certainly disruptive to family life and to their children's education.
I mean, these are good points, and I'm glad you're making them, because it's important that we answer them. And we sincerely want to apologise to parents for the disruption to their children's education that our strike will cause, and to sincerely apologise to them for the disruption to their working lives and their home lives. We believe that we are taking action on one level in the interests of their children, of getting investment in this generation of children. The government sometimes sounds like it might make an investment in education in 5 or 10 years' time. This generation of children need to have investment in them. We need to have GCSE chemistry classes with chemistry teachers, GCSE maths class with maths teachers. We need to have special needs assistants for children with special needs. We need permanent staff in primary schools, not just a succession of temporary staff, all of them doing a good job, but we are having real difficulties getting, recruiting and retaining enough staff at the moment. So we're taking action to try and get the government to move on that. And we want to say to government, and all MPs really, you can't imagine a sustainably growing economy where a government doesn't invest in education, where it doesn't invest in the health service, actually. There has to be a sense of investment in our schools and the people who work in them.
Kevin Courtney, Joint General Secretary for the National Education Union. Good to have you with us this morning. Thank you very much.